Saludos, and welcome to our next session of our Hacer Leadership Pipeline program titled Three Ways to Lead Your ERGs. We know that employee resource groups, some of you call them business resource groups, associate resource groups, but they're all still a very common denominator that brings groups that have common things together so that way it's not only just coming together at your companies, but also how you align it to your business strategies. And this can be a great empowering session that we're going to share with you today. Our session is made possible thanks to two sponsors, General Motors and Molson Coors. And so I'd like to share with you a video from our sponsor, General Motors. Great. Thank you to General Motors for your support of our set session. Our second sponsor is Molson Coors. And here to give remarks on behalf of Molson Coors, please welcome Stephen Brown. He is the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Molson Coors. Stephen.
Hey everyone, again, this is Stephen Brown. Regret I didn't have such a cool commercial that you just saw there, but I am excited about what we do here at Molson Coors. I just wanted to pause and really congratulate you, each of you, for your participation in the Leadership Pipeline program, and more importantly, being leaders within your organization and in your community. Molson Coors has been a proud partner from day one with HiSET, and we're one of those initial corporate founding organizations. And one of the reasons that we're active is we just believe that the presence of all people of color, particularly Black, Brown, Latinos, very specifically should be present within corporate America. And then also making sure that those leaders, that we continue to develop the next generation of lab leaders within the organization. And that's one of the key pieces that we do here. We also are very proud in regards to the number of ERGs we have within our organization. We have 11 of them. One of the more active ones is our Ola Chin ERG, and has been around for more than 20 years, two decades. And so very specifically, this isn't new for us, but we also recognize that the work doesn't get old. Work continues to happen, and so having a very active ERG, very specifically around our Ola Chin, is important to us. Overall, Molson Coors has continued to be committed to racial issues, justice issues, equity issues, equality. And in fact, over the last 2 years, we've donated over $3 million to a initiative that we call Project Justice. So very specifically, we've been able to donate to 33 organizations that are looking to continue to move the needle as it relates to equality, equity, racial justice. And I'm extremely proud to be affiliated with that. We recognize that our work is nowhere near done. We have a lot more that we want to continue to do. We have the scholarships, we have the support overall of many of the communities. So we are proud to be partners. We're excited about this program today. I'm excited about this panel that you're about to hear around the ERGs, because we recognize that ERG is a huge part of our overall mission as relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So again, I want to thank you for your participation and continue to enjoy the conference. Back to you. Back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen Brown, Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Molson Coors. Thank you, Molson Coors. Thank you, GM, for your support of this session, 3 Ways to Lead Your ERG. So let's get started. One minor housekeeping, we encourage you to share your comments. Remember, this is live right now, so make sure that you're sharing your comments, ask questions, and we'll make sure that we get them to all the panelists. So let me get started with introducing our moderator for today's session. She is our Vice President for Strategic Engagement and Initiative at HACER, and no stranger to diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. Please welcome our moderator, Jai Vadgas.
In today's session titled 3 Ways to Lead Your ERG, we'll be talking with 3 ERG leaders from across the country who have made sure that their ERG strategies impact a number of areas within the business: corporate social responsibility, professional development and mentorship programs, and one of my favorite topics, impacting the organization's bottom line. For all of you watching, as Sid mentioned, please make sure that you find your chat box so that we can gather all of the questions and insights that you're interested in seeking from today's ERG experts. I'd love to welcome the panelists. And first, I'd like to welcome Laura Saldana from Glaxosmithkline, also known as GSK. Laura grows brands profitably and is a passionate advocate of development in inclusion and diversity. She leads the expert omni-channel strategy for Voltaren and Advil. And in the US, she manages Crece, which is GSK's Hispanic Employee Resource Group. Laura, welcome to today's conversation on ERG strategies. And I want to give you a few moments to elaborate a little bit more on your personal and professional career trajectory and anything else that you'd love to share about your role at GSK. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Yai, for the opportunity. I'm really excited to be here today. I was born and raised in Mexico City. I've been living in the US for the last little bit over 12 years. And I think part of that trajectory speaks to why I decided to join and raise my hand when there was this opportunity to lead the Hispanic ERG at GSK. And it's coming from another country and feeling kind of the tension perhaps between keeping true to who I was back then and then keeping true also to what I was feeling and sensing around me as I was evolving in my career. I started my career in Procter & Gamble in Mexico City in finance. And then when I moved to the US, I started working for a small cable manufacturer in North Carolina. Then I completed my MBA degree with Duke University. And with that, I joined Novartis Animal Health, which later was acquired by Glaxosmithkline in a joint venture. And I think that the common theme that I started noticing as I got more embedded professionally in the U.S. was this need to really reinforce and all the contributions and the voices of Hispanic associates in the company, and to help establish across different elements that you've spoken about, right? Development, community impact, as well as even things like procurement. How do we elevate the impact that we can have as a company and as individuals to bring diversity along with us, especially for Hispanic associates? So that's a passion point of mine, and one that I'm really happy to cover today.
Gracias, Laura. I appreciate you being here, and we can't wait to hear you share about what you've developed for the ERG Crece at GSK. Next is David Betancourt, also known as David Betancourt, who serves as the Vice President of External Affairs, Market Manager for Comerica Bank, where he is responsible for leading Community Reinvestment Act initiatives through community and economic development programs and services throughout all of Southern California. David also administers cross-departmental collaboration within external affairs, employee and business resource groups, and other business divisions to lead the bank's Hispanic outreach strategy nationally. David, welcome. And I'll give you a few moments to share a little bit more about your role at Comerica Bank and anything else that you want to share with us personally or professionally.
Yes, thank you. And good morning to everybody, or good afternoon, depending where you're joining us from. I'm in Los Angeles, so it's morning for me. I was born and raised in California, and I grew up in West Covina and then moved to La Puente when I went to high school. My grandparents were from Mexico and Cuba. So although I'm third generation of U.S. citizen, I was a first generation college student. So growing up, I still had to navigate kind of what that was for me and how to go about adjusting to higher education and then overall into your career. And so, one of the things that really opened my eyes, right, was I was actually in a program through the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce. And it was a professional development program for first generation Latino students like myself. And I remember hearing stories of what other students went through, right? And I remember hearing just backgrounds that were they had so many more obstacles than what I had to go through, right? And that's when kind of a light bulb went off in my head of, if I didn't have to go through so many different obstacles and barriers, which not that everything was perfect, but still, I knew I needed to do more with my career and what, I was doing. And so during that time, I was working at the University of La Verne in the Small Business Development Center. So we were providing small business technical assistance services. That's when I started getting more involved with different chambers of commerce. And then I actually worked for the LA Area Chamber of Commerce, where I was leading their small business and workforce development programs. And then eventually, in the middle of the pandemic, came over to Comerica Bank. We're now, like you mentioned, I'm the external affairs market manager for Southern California. So basically anything from Ventura County down to the Mexico border is my territory. And the exciting part about the role and what I really love about it is that we kind of need to be in the know of everything that the bank is doing, right? So everything from investments to programs, product development, policy, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, like what we're going to talk about today. So not only am I a member and take a leadership role in our Hispanic business resource group, but I actually get to be involved with all the business resource groups and get to do a lot of really great work across the bank nationally. So looking forward to a great conversation. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. And now rounding off our panel is my friend, Carlos Quesada, who's the head of customer success and digital services strategy at Aruba, a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise company, HPE. At HPE, he is very active within the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts through his leadership as the executive sponsor for Juntos, the Hispanic ERG, as well as serving on the Executive Inclusion and Diversity Board for HPE. Carlos My friend, welcome to the virtual stage, and share with us a little bit more about your work and anything else that you'd love to share personally or professionally about your trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Jai, and thank you, Asad, for having me. And, kudos to you guys for recognizing the importance and the criticality of the work that ERGs do with these companies. A little bit about myself, born and raised in Degollado, Jalisco, Mexico. Came to the United States when I was 13. Most of my career, I've taken the unconventional route. I didn't go to a formal four-year university, I ended up going the trade school route. And one of the things that I was very passionate about earlier is I feel like I was very blessed and fortunate with the opportunities that were given to me, and recognize that it was my responsibility to help those behind me to really shorten the cycle of, what I consider the kind of immigrant life cycle. As you come into the country, many of the folks around you don't speak English, and so you're kind of figuring things out on your own. And I felt that there's a lot of great content out there to help the Latino community, but most of it's in English. And so I was always very passionate about really sharing a lot of that knowledge back to the immigrant community to help them kind of accelerate their path. And so with that, I've been in a number of startups most of my career, and I joined HPE Aruba about 4 or 5 years ago. And already having done some work in the community, I was looking for a way to be able to leverage HPE as a platform to really amplify some of the work that we were already doing in the community. And that's where I came across the concept of the employee resource group. So I started with Juntos as a member originally, and then eventually was asked and nominated to be part of be the executive sponsor for Juntos. And that's really been, my passion project here at the company. As the exec sponsor, I feel very fortunate to be, coach, mentor, and sponsor for many of our Juntos ERG leaders. And over the past 2 to 3 years, we've had an opportunity to grow in Juntos to really a national ERG organization, and really watching many of the Juntos leadership really elevate with themselves within the company as well. And then last year, one of the most rewarding things is Juntos was actually recognized as one of the top 16 ERGs in the country by Latina Style magazine. So a lot of great rewarding work. And as you mentioned, Jai, as part of HPE, I also have the privilege of representing my community in the company's inclusion and diversity board with the senior leadership of the company, and really help driving, some of the work that the company has to do for not only from an I&D perspective, but in everything we do. As you mentioned, I also run the customer success organization for Aruba, and I&D makes it into not only, the corporate culture, but also into, the products that we deliver in our engagements with the customer. So much so that there's conscious effort and including things like diversity thinking when we're doing things like persona journey mapping as part of the customer experience, making sure that as we're thinking about our customers, we're thinking about them, as far as kind of their diverse background and how they engage with us in our product. So, very fortunate to be a part of this, and looking forward to a great session. And again, thanks for setting this up. I think, like I said, the ERG contributions to the company are great, and looking forward to having the conversation.
I love it. Gracias, Carlos. So this is it, everyone. We have over 800 people listening in to this conversation. Laura, David, Carlos, I hope that you're ready for this. We're going to have an incredible opportunity to engage with those individuals who either run ERGs or are part of ERGs at their organizations. The first person that I want to direct my first question to is Laura. Laura, I mentioned that I love the topic of how ERGs or BRGs can impact the overall organization's bottom line. So I would love for you to share with us what's one way that your ERG, Crece, has been able to tie to GSK's bottom line, whether it's helping with recruiting, sales, or community engagement.
Awesome. Yeah, I also love the topic of making sure that we are delivering on the business objective. So to me, like the easy answer, or one of the easy answers, is the key lever that Glaxosmithkline has to deliver its bottom line and top line goals is its talent, right? So within Crece, our Hispanic ERG, 2 of our pillars of focus are around talent, whether it's attraction and recruitment or development and retention. And so through these, what I see is like we are a key enabler helping the company's talent represent the diversity of the marketplace, and in helping ensure that that talent continues to grow within the company to bring kind of, again, the voices of diversity and the marketplace into anything and everything we do, from how we communicate with patients and with doctors, with consumers, to even the policies that we support within our employee and associates. So that's kind of, to me, one of the most basic answers. I think, in addition, when we think of what I call our third pillar, which is around that community engagement, part of what we're trying to do there is set ourselves for success in the future, right? So we've had the chance of listening directly from you, Yai, as well as overall from Acer and from Sid Wilson in some of our Hispanic Heritage Month events. And we know that the reality of Hispanics being kind of the seventh economy, when you look at kind of aggregating our GDP, where it would rank relative to other countries. So how do we set up the company for success is by making sure that we harness and we represent kind of the voices of and the interest of Hispanic communities. So community engagement, to me, is a key foundational element that can also connect with the bottom line as well.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate that. My next question is for you, Carlos, at HPE. There are many leaders here of ERGs who are watching who don't necessarily have the resources available to them to create a significant short or long-term strategy for their ERGs. Can you share with us one way that you've partnered with another company's ERG, or even internally with a different ERG, to meet some of those shared goals, to share some of those resources?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think partnership is key. When you talk about, what the ERG's kind of core focus and mission, I think many of the ERG leaders here would agree that we all have kind of very common goals. As Laura mentioned, attract and retain talent is a common goal most ERGs share. The next is for the members that are already in the company, how do we help with professional development? The next is, what are we doing in the community to not only go in and amplify the work that we're doing in the community, but how do we also kind of make sure that the company's brand is represented well in the community? And then last is, right, how do we contribute back to the company, to your point, the bottom line? So knowing that those are the four very common objectives for most ERGs, I think it's important to kind of reach out and figure out what are the other ERGs in your area doing. What I've normally find is that some ERGs are really strong in one, but not as strong in the other. And so it's super important to maybe get together with those other ERGs, whether internally within your company or externally, and share some of those best practices. One of the things that I didn't cover earlier is, because of this need for partnership and learning from each other during the pandemic, one of the things that we did over at Juntos is we actually created and kind of co-founded an ERG collaborative called Unidos ERG Collaborative. And the goal there was, a lot of ERGs were really under stress trying to figure out, how do we continue to exist in this kind of remote world? And what are other ERGs doing to overcome maybe the lack of participation or engagement from the members? And so that's how this whole concept of the Unidos ERG came together, right? Unidos somos más fuertes, together we are stronger. But it's not just collaborating across the ERGs, but it's also internally within the company. I would say one of the other things that many of our ERGs share is the lack of significant budget, right? Although many companies, believe in this concept of ERG and they're touting the IND flag, a lot of times, the budget just isn't there for a lot of the programs that we want to do. So getting really creative and being able to co-fund, co-sponsor events, I think, is one. The other thing too is sharing those relationships and those partnerships. So for example, with us in the Bay Area, we've established really great partnerships with a number of community organizations that we do a lot of work with, as well as organizations like the Mexican Consulate. And so sharing those resources with other ERGs bidirectionally really helps you go drive some of those programs, as well as really amplify the work that you're doing. And then lastly, there's also partnerships within the rest of the organization. So at HPE, for example, we have the Hpe Foundation. And there's a bunch of work that organization is doing. So for example, as part of Hispanic Heritage Month, we also partnered with the foundation as well as some of our marketing side of the house, where HPE does sponsor some pretty well-known name brands. And so leveraging those marketing resources in the company to see if we could leverage some of those relationships to bring some of those really high-end keynote speakers in exchange for some of the work that's already happening. So that's been very, very critical for us. I think Juntos has done a pretty good job of doing a lot with a little. And I think externally or optically, it looks like there's a lot of budget behind what we're doing, but I would say 90% of it's based on a lot of the partnerships and relationships that the group has built.
Love that. For all of those that are listening in, make sure that you connect with all of our panelists on LinkedIn, because exactly how Carlos was mentioning, you don't have to recreate the wheel. You can share these resources across companies. My next question is for David. David, when you and I were preparing for this conversation, you mentioned that you actually joined Comerica during the pandemic in April 2020. Right, and all of your ERG events have been virtual thus far. Can you share with us one major challenge you were faced with in the ERG, whether it was this one of a hybrid work model, perhaps the challenge of engagement with Zoom fatigue, or any other challenge that you had, and then the solution that you proposed for that ERG?
Yes, and thank you for that question, because I couldn't have joined the bank at a more interesting time, right? And I think I would have loved it to be hybrid, but in reality, I never saw my office. I had my computer mailed to me, and I hit the ground running from the first day. But I think there's two, I guess, challenges that I could pinpoint. I mean, when we look at the year of 2020, I think there's so many things that we can say were challenges, but as it relates to the BRGs, for me, it's how do you increase and retain member engagement? But then also in a pandemic environment, how do you re-strategize what you do as a BRG or as an ERG, right? And so, when I came into my role, external affairs, one of the things that we focus on primarily is the Community Reinvestment Act investments and programs that we do in the community. Right. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with Community Reinvestment Act, it's a federal law, how the bank gets regulated. And we need to primarily focus our efforts on low to moderate income communities and small businesses and affordable housing areas. Those are our three pillars. And so, when I was listening into one of my first BRG meetings, and I'm hearing, okay, we can't do mixers anymore. We can't really do in-person recruiting job fairs anymore. There's no luncheons, galas, anything like that. So what do we do? How do we repurpose our strategy? And how do we, make sure, like you said, Zoom fatigue doesn't happen and we don't start losing our members. And so, one of the things that I felt like we really needed to do, and I think we all of our BRGs did a really great job at this, is we started collaborating a lot more with our external affairs team. Right. And so I think Carlos also mentioned it. I mean, BRGs and ERGs don't have, as much resources as we would like to. Luckily, external affairs has some of those resources, but there's also a fine line to make sure that whatever we're doing is aligned with one another. Right. So I mentioned our focus is low to moderate income communities for external affairs. By definition, diversity does not play a role there. But in reality, we all know, just as a byproduct, those communities just happen to be people of color, right? And so as it was middle of the pandemic, we're thinking, okay, so as a BRG, what can we do that is still providing impact to the community while still creating visibility for the BRG itself? So we started partnering with nonprofits, community partners that we work with, doing food distribution, doing PPE distribution, general household supplies, financial education. And one of the big things, I think, of how we also made sure that we kept the members engaged is really creating those all-around relationships with those organizations, right? And so every time I would meet with somebody, it's not just about the funding. it's not just about, volunteer opportunity, but, what else can we do to be more engaged? And a lot of times, nonprofits have advisory boards, they have committees, they have board of directors. And so when we're able to align what we're doing in the community with our employee resource groups and our business resource groups, we're providing value to our members, and it makes the members want to stay involved because they see value in being involved. And so that was one of the biggest things that I think played a big role. And then executive sponsorship, I think, is also a huge opportunity, because once you have mid-senior to entry-level folks seeing that they have executive level of support, it shows them that, hey, this is actually something serious. This is something that the bank is really invested in, right? And so it makes them want to be involved, and it makes them want to, join the different BRGs. So, for those of you who are listening, I would highly encourage you to connect with whoever your community relations people are, external affairs, government affairs, right? Because if you're able to collaborate with them and find some type of way to align with what they're doing, maybe not everything will be aligned, but if you find certain events or programs here or there that can align, that's actually going to create a lot more impact and give you a lot more resources to do what you need to do and be visible in the community. And so those were probably the two biggest things that I felt were the biggest challenges, is member engagement, which was, again, finding opportunity to create value for the members, and visibility, and then overall, the community impact and making sure that it's aligned with what the bank is doing, and the BRG is still able to provide value to the community during a virtual environment.
I love it. This conversation is making my heart so happy. And for those of you who are dropping in questions in the chat box, we hear you, we see you. David was just touching upon the fact that when you have content and programming that aligns with an individual's personal values and ethics in the community, that's when engagement is going to go up. And so making sure that you connect with the person that is completely involved with external engagement, nonprofit communications, right, and philanthropy, bring that back to the ERG, because ERG members are so connected and focused, and they want to give back. They're just looking for that opportunity and that avenue. And it's your role and responsibility with leading the ERG to align those two, exactly how David mentioned. The next question that I have is for Laura. Laura, I understand that GSK is a very large organization with many ERG members across the globe. When it comes to virtual engagement with it, which is a very hot topic in our chat box, as you can see here, when it comes to engagement of a very global perspective and membership base, how do you practice equity in communication? Not equality, right? Because those things are two very different concepts. How do you make sure that they have fair access to the opportunities you're creating at Crece for GSK's Hispanic ERG?
That's a great question, yeah, and it's one that we are very purposeful and intentional about. So I would say it's three things. One is lead times. One of the things that ensures people can plan and make sure that they can make time to join the events that we're creating is simply to know about them enough in advance. So we've been making tremendous strides at giving visibility well ahead of events to give people the chance to join. The second element would be using a kind of 360 activation, right, across different tactics. We know not everyone responds equally to communication. So some prefer email, some might use our internal kind of social platform called Workplace. Some might prefer their senior leaderships inviting them to join, right? So we use all of these tactics and calendar holds to try to create that awareness about the event happening. And the third thing we do is technology. So to us, equity means also that people who cannot join the event live can always join it on demand. And then we also use technology as a way to ensure people can, at their own pace, kind of ingest the information. How we do that is the platform that we use, Microsoft Teams, enables us to do closed captioning of our content, and we do closed captioning of the videos when we upload them for availability on demand to our portal. So that to us also gives people the chance to, again, at their own pace, maybe slow down the video, play it faster. Again, read versus hear the conversation, and to us those are kind of the three ways that we try to make sure, again, people can access our content in their own way at their own pace.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So for those of you who are wondering what's one low-hanging fruit that Laura just mentioned, is making sure that you have closed captioning, right? Exactly how we have on ASER's platform, VFairs, where you're watching us from. You can toggle between the chat and the transcript. It's so important that we make sure that everyone is included in this conversation, especially people who are hard of hearing or deaf. They can read along and be part of this conversation. My next question is for Carlos. Let's talk a little bit about philanthropy, corporate social responsibility. I know that HPE does a lot in the community. Tell me a little bit about how your ERG has been able to partner with the philanthropy department and any programs that you've launched together in doing so for the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. Yeah, and yeah, to your point, HPE does have the Hpe Foundation where a lot of that work happens. I would say just kind of going back to your earlier comment about how we leverage those partnerships. So on the IND executive board, I actually am part of the community subcommittee. And so some of the work that's happened through the Hpe Foundation are things around really building and creating kind of toolkits and playbooks that can be shared across the globe to engage early career and even high school students on potentially pursuing a career in tech. So the idea here is to go in and create a toolkit that can be shared with any of the ERGs across the company, not just the Juntos Hispanic one, but any of the ERGs across the company, across the globe, where they can go into their communities and engage at the high school or college level and really create this interactive content that can really, one, promote the HPE brand and how it participates, in tech and also in social responsibility, but also, potentially expand the horizons of some of these students that may have not considered a career in tech. Many times when we bring in high school students into the company, one of the things that we hear is, well, I always assumed that in order to be in tech, I needed to be an engineer. So helping understand those students that, you could also be marketing, sales, there's plenty of other roles other than engineering role to bring students into tech. So that's one example. Another example is, we actually have built out what's called the, we call the EOC scholarship, which basically allows the ERGs to go in and participate in the college recruitment programs, and then through that offer scholarships to some of the students that qualify. And as part of that program, aside from just getting the scholarships, you're actually brought into the company through one of the ERGs. You're assigned a mentor, and throughout the entire process of applying for the internship and all the way through actually being employed, you actually have that kind of coach throughout the entire session, right? So those are some of the examples of the work that we've done at a company level. From a Juntos perspective, one of the things that we're actually very proud of is we've actually launched a yearly program called Latina Emprendedora, which I actually have an example, a photo here. Is what we do is we launched this a few years ago, and it's essentially teaching Latina women how to start and grow their own business 100% in Spanish, and it's 100% free. So we actually partner up with a number of other ERGs, and we bring these women into the company, and for an entire day really immerse them in really creating a business plan, marketing, bookkeeping, and all these other things. And every year we actually will spotlight some of the women in the community who have actually now grown their business. So quite a bit of work in the community. Probably one of my favorite parts of IND is engaging with the community and really helping out those of us that are a few years behind us.
Wow, Latina Emprendedora. I absolutely love that. It's making sure that you are impacting the community in really unique ways. Thank you, Carlos. David, I want to give you the opportunity to answer the same question, because I know that I've seen Comerica Bank do so much externally within the community. What examples of philanthropy coupled with the ERG strategy can you share with us today?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. And so, at Comerica Bank, our slogan is to raise expectations of what a bank can be, right? That's our model that we live by. And so we understand what kind of bank we are. We understand our identity, right? And so one of the things that we're really big on is how do we become a value add partner for our community partners, right? I mean, sponsorships are always great. Of course, we're gonna, support there, but what else can we provide to, provide our own expertise to really give back and be engaged in the community? And so, two of our signature programs, I would say, is called Business Sense and Money Sense, right? And so during the pandemic specifically, one of the signature programs that we launched nationally was called our Comerica Bank Recovery Business Sense Bootcamp. And so when we launched that, we did everything from small business financial statements to lending to understanding how to grow your business. And we even brought in some of our own CDFI partners that we invest with, and we created a panel. So, of course, if you can't go get a loan from a national bank, you could still go to one of our trusted CDFI partners, right? And the way it all kind of ties back into our business resource groups is we partnered with the Hispanic Chambers. We partnered with the Asian Pacific Islander Small Business Program, with Pacific Asian Consortium. And so we did these boot camps in partnership with our BRGs in Spanish, in Mandarin. And so we were making sure that we were doing things that were relatable to every type of business owner in the community. On the Money Sense side, we actually partnered with the Hpe Foundation. This is one of the programs I'm the most proud of. I'm proud of all of our programs, but this one just stands out, and it's a great example of how we tied in our BRGs. And so, one of our priorities or focus areas for 2021 was women empowerment. And a big reason for that comes back to gender equality and, the process that we were, the progress that we were making there actually took steps back as a result of the pandemic, because, women ended up leaving the workforce because they were most likely the primary caretakers for their families. And so we partnered with the Hpe Foundation, and we held a program called Women Empower. And what it was is we had moms paired with their daughters, 2 cohorts, one in Spanish and one in English. And we took them through a complete financial education curriculum to where they were able to understand how to better save their money, how to go grocery shopping on a budget, and how to improve their credit score. And so at the end of it, we were able to tie in our women business resource groups for the English cohort. We tied in our Hispanic business resource groups for the Spanish cohort. And then, by the way, some of them actually didn't have bank accounts, because still to this day, not everybody has a bank account. So we were actually able to still open up checking and savings accounts on the spot. Right. And so that, I think, all ties back into the bottom line of not only are we providing an impact to the community, but also those business development opportunities that we're always looking for. And, not everything we do has to be business development, and everything that we do, we're never coming off as we're trying to sell. But this example is a perfect way to show if you are engaged in the community and you're showing that you are a trusted partner, those things just happen organically. And so those are probably the 2, perfect examples I can think of right now, just for, how do we focus on the financial education piece and serving those underserved community families, and then also the small businesses that, we all know just we're struggling so much trying to get access to capital and figuring out how do they pivot their business to withstand the pandemic.
I love that. You know what? I love the way that you were able to leverage the ERG's members to create those talent, small business boot camps, as well as financial literacy and wellness for young moms and Latinas out there in the community. For those of you wondering how you can leverage your ERG members for these significant programs externally, David just shared a phenomenal way to be able to do that, right? You've got to be able to leverage your ERG members by creating these programs externally that are going to impact your business, right? For them in business development, it's opening up more bank accounts and making sure that women are understanding how to leverage their financial wellness and literacy. Thank you, David. That was phenomenal. Now what I want to do is I want to pivot to some of the questions within the chat box that we've been receiving. I want to open this up to any of you on the panel because we're getting a lot of questions around engagement. Because of the fact that we've been working from home for 19 months now, we have a lot of questions around how do you get people to show up to these virtual events when we host them through our ERGs. And so, Laura, what can you tell us about making sure that people show up when we put in so much sweat equity in creating these programs?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. And so I think there are a few things that we kind of already touched on, but one of the things that we've been doing more is asking our sponsors to be more vocal and help us drive that engagement. So we're asking them, for example, to create a video where they talk about why they are excited about an upcoming event. We're asking them to share with their peers at a leadership team level that an event is happening. We're also asking through the use of different boards that we're part of, like the Global Ethnicity Council or the Diversity and Inclusion Squad, to help us spread the word. And then I will have to also say it's almost using some of your personal currency, right? Within your leadership team in your ERG or within the members that have attended before, ask them to help bring someone along, and don't only narrow it down to your target audience, which obviously are Hispanic associates, right? But ask them to bring an ally over to learn more, to participate, to get engaged. I think that the combination of tactics, right? Asking for support from the sponsors, the different channels that I mentioned to you before, right? Driving broad awareness to this, but even relying on your personal currency and that of people around you to create awareness around it can have a big impact on engagement.
I love it. And how about Carlos or David? Do you have any advice for making sure that we have not just the Latino or the Hispanics at the organization joining, but they bring along an ally as well to join in these conversations that actually benefit them in helping us here at work? Any advice you want to share?
Yeah, if I may, I was actually going to piggyback off of the earlier conversation. So, going back to the question about how do we drive engagement, I think sometimes, and there's actually another question here in the chat that I'd like to maybe tie into this, which is about how do you get leadership to acknowledge and to allow X percentage of an employee's time to be dedicated to some of these events and to the ERGs? And so as I was reflecting on both of those conversations, one of the things that I would say at HPE, one of the things that we've done is every year we have what's called the Voice of the Workforce survey, and we actually go in and we try to drive as much participation in that survey as possible. And some of the questions in that survey are actually around, how basically asking the employee, does your manager allow and promote you to be part of an ERG, right? Like how often or how well does your boss kind of promote and kind of push you to participate more in these things? And so going back to your comment earlier, it really is from the top down, right? Making sure that the leaders in the company are also making sure that they're promoting these types of events and actually recommending to the employees that they participate and that they recognize that it's okay for them to take time out of their normal day-to-day and be part of these. Because one of the things that we find is those ERG members that are the most active and that are actually consuming these are those same employees that are actually learning leadership skills that they may not be learning in their day-to-day job. And one example, right, is by being part of an ERG board, you now have a little bit more leadership and board experience that you wouldn't normally have in your day job. And so for us, that's one of the ways that we drive more of that engagement is, as part of, in our team, when we have our monthly, all hands meetings, right, we actually will go in and publish what are the ERG events that are coming up, not just Hispanic ERGs, but any ERGs, and, promote them so that the employees in our team, know that it's okay and then that it's expected that they do participate in some of these things. And and that they get value out of that.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to pivot to a question that was also shared in the audience. Can some of you share the ways in which you create your focus strategies? When you're leading an ERG, what should you be focused on solving, and how do you figure that out? Carlos mentioned a survey, which is something that I think needs to be implemented almost every 4 months. But who can talk a little bit about some of the focus strategies that you should prioritize when leading an ERG?
Sure, I could take that one. And I think that there's so much that could go into running a BRG, right? That it can be really easy to kind of get lost, especially if you're leading the BRG and you're trying to figure out, okay, like, what do I do? Like, what's the next step? And sometimes it's helpful just to kind of take a step back, right? And just kind of start from the basics. And so, one of the most common things that I think a lot of BRGs kind of define their strategy on is based on the 4 C's, right? So if you go like on Diversity Inc. or wherever they talk about the 4 C's of running a BRG or ERG, career, commerce, community, and culture, right? And so you don't necessarily need to focus on each of them specifically, but you should at least have your top 2, right? And that should kind of be your focus area of how you drive what you do in your BRG. The other thing, if you don't already have one, is you need to have a mission statement of what does your BRG or ERG stand for. And every decision you make needs to go back to that mission statement. Is it aligned with what you're doing? And so, for me, one of the biggest thing is that you need to be able to provide value, and you need to be able to make sure that you're staying in alignment with your company. For most of the members of BRGs and ERGs, they have day-to-day roles that are not really community focused, right? They're doing work for the company. So when they join a BRG or an ERG, that's another meeting that they just put on their calendar. So you need to figure out, how do I make people want to show up to these meetings and really find and really get value out of it? So you need to be able to provide value and hold accountability. One of the biggest things that I think works is when you're out and you're meeting more people within your company, you're going to start noticing there's going to be some employees that naturally just have that community focus. And they are asking, how do I get more involved? Like, what can I do? Those are the people that you should be recruiting into your BRG and your ERG, because what that's going to do, right, is when you have these new members that are showing up to these meetings and they're engaged and they're planning, and they're, really making an impact from day one, that's going to start, making the other members notice, like, hey, I need to step it up. I need to maybe start being a little bit more engaged here, because look at the visibility, look at the career mobility that this person's receiving, all because of their engagement, right? And so, again, providing value, holding each other accountable, and then really focusing back to either the 4 C's and your mission statement. And as the world changes, which it seems like every other day it's changing, make sure that you're keeping constant communication with, your external focused employees, so that way you know which direction the bank is heading or your company is heading. But just really making sure that you are, staying in alignment with the messaging of your company, and making sure your members are actually getting a lot out of being part of your group.
I love it. The 4 C's and your mission statement. And again, for those of you watching, please make sure that you go back, you take all of this in, and you replay these conversations so that you can take notes on how to implement something tomorrow. I want to give an opportunity to all of our panelists to share some insights for all of you. What is one thing that everyone can take away to be able to implement tomorrow or next week? And I want to start off with Laura. What is one thing that everyone listening in today can take away and implement immediately tomorrow?
I think for me, the biggest learning about this year is you can always be a little bit more courageous than before. And what that means is, think of what could be like a wild idea, right? Or reaching out to an executive sponsor that you would never dream of reaching out to. and just ask, because the worst thing that can happen is that they say no, and actually hearing a no is a good thing, because now you know that's not a person you want to partner with, or that's not a project that you can make happen now. But then also understanding the why can help illuminate a path forward, and you'll end up in a much more inspirational place than you were before you tried, right? So if there's one thing you do, is just try to be a little bit more courageous every time.
I love that. Being a little bit more courageous. Carlos from HPE, what is one thing those watching here today can take away to implement immediately tomorrow?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great content that's been shared over the last 30 days from Hispanic Heritage Month. And I think that it's important that a lot of that doesn't fall on deaf ears. I think it's leveraging a lot of the work that's happened over the last 30 days and figuring out how we can take that forward for the next year. I love the work that the Hispanic Star has done this year and really consolidating that message so we all sing off the same kind of songbook. So I'd highly recommend the ERG leaders to go on the Hispanic Star and download that toolkit. And then also, shameless plug, I think, going back to my earlier comment, is the partnerships. I would recommend the ERG leaders on here to really connect with each other and learn from each other. So the purpose of unidoserg.com is to really bring everybody together and have a platform where we can meet, introduce each other, and share what we're doing. And we're already seeing a lot of that great work happening, having ERGs connecting on the East Coast, realizing that they're just a couple miles away from each other, and now activating locally to drive some of those community efforts. So for me, the takeaway is, leverage those partnerships, leverage the information that's out there. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, and reach out and connect.
I love that. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Join Unidos. And if you don't know how to attract the Unidos community, make sure that you add Carlos on LinkedIn, as well as all of our other panelists. David, I want to give you the last moment to give some advice on those watching here today on what they can implement tomorrow when it comes to their ERG strategy.
Collaborate. I mean, I think that's something common that just kept coming up in this conversation is you need to collaborate. You need to work with all the BRGs and ERGs in your company. You need to talk and have conversations with executive sponsors, because you can't do it on your own. And the more you talk things out, the more ideas and even resources can come out of those conversations. So if there's somebody that could be beneficial or has really great ideas, reach out to them tomorrow, set up a meeting, even if it's 30 minutes, and collaborate. And at the end of the day, it all has to come down to what is the business case, right? So as you look at your ERG or BRG, think about what impact am I making, right? Are we sponsoring something to have our logo on there, or are we actually making an impact and changing lives in the community? For me, that's really a big passion of mine. Is it's not just about the visibility and the promotion. I mean, all of that is great. I think we all love that. But what are you really doing as a company, as a group, to truly make an impact in the community? So as you have those conversations with different people, find out what other folks are doing. And like Carlos said, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You could do something similar, or maybe just, change it up a little bit so that way it's more aligned with your group.
Thank you. And thank you, Laura, Carlos, David, for sharing your ERG best practices today. And remember, if you're currently leading an ERG and you're struggling with engagement strategies or resources, it's so important for us to reach out to all of the individuals that were part of this panel, or to join Unidos, which Carlos has created externally, and be able to share some of those ideas, strategies, and resources to help one another. We must make sure that our organizations can come together to develop our Latinx professionals within the community, as well as internally here at work. Again, please follow all of our panelists on LinkedIn, and don't forget to use our hashtag for today and tomorrow's program, HacerLPP21. I will now pass it over to Sid Wilson, our president and CEO of Hacer, for some closing remarks of this session. Sid, take it away.
you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you to David Betancourt for Comerica Bank, Laura Saldana from Glaxosmithkline, and Carlos Quesada from Hewlett Packard Enterprises. And of course, a big thanks to Jai Vargas, our very own Vice President of Strategic Engagement and Initiatives. We hope you all had a great session about 3 ways to lead your ERG group. It was an inspiring session. We hope you're sharing your experiences on social media. Remember to use the hashtag HACERLPP20, HACERLPP21, HACR21. So with that, what we're going to do now is we are going to network. So we encourage everyone to visit the networking lounge. So when you come out of this session and go into the main lobby, you'll go to the area where it says networking. We're going to get a chance to get to know each other, network with each other, and then after some great networking, we'll then have one more session this afternoon called Preparing for Senior Leadership. You don't want to miss this because this is going to be a great session. It'll be our concluding session for today, and then we'll have one more session tomorrow. So networking now, and then followed by preparing for senior leadership. I look forward to getting to know and connecting with all of you. Thank you so much. We'll see you on Networking Lounge. Thank you so much.